Good morning, everyone. This is the 8th lecture in SAT Math series by Excellentia. This is the final lecture. Today, we are going to cover up whatever we have missed up till now. First, we'll start with certain geometrical facts. Once we are done with that part, once we are done with entire portion, after that, we'll start looking at everything that we have covered till date in this series. So first, we are going to study some facts about circles. Okay. This parts we should know them. So first, suppose if I take 2 points on a circle, on the circumference of the circle is nothing but boundary of the circle. And if I were to join both of this point, such a segment which connects 2 points is called as chord of the circle. Okay. If this chord were to pass through the center of the circle, then we call such a chord as diameter of the circle. Okay, do remember diameter is a chord which passes through center of the circle. Now out of this, if I were to only look at this part from center, segment connecting center to one point on the circumference, such a segment is called as radius of the circle. Okay. Also, if I were to extend this chord into a line, if this chord were part of a line, such a line is called as secant of a circle, whereas a line which just touches circle at one point, basically brushes past one point of the circle, such a line is called as tangent to the circle. Okay. Also on the circle, suppose if I were to take some part of the boundary, let's say this part, if I take this part of the circle is called as arc of the circle. Okay, arc of the circle. And if I were to connect this like this with the center, the pizza like piece, one piece of pizza like figure that we are getting is called as sector of the circle. Okay, and if I were to break it here like this is called as segment of the circle. These are some parts of the circles. Now we'll be looking at some properties and theorems that we have already studied about the circle. Here center of the circle has been given to us. Now suppose if I were to make some angle at the center, okay, using this arc AB, endpoints of the arc AB. Let's say this angle came out to be 100 degrees. It doesn't look like 100 degrees, I know, but let's assume that's a 100-degree angle. Now, if the same arc is making another angle on the circumference, this angle will always be half of that of the one at the center. Okay, no matter how many angles I make like this on the circumference, each of this will be half of that of the center. So here there are two important properties that we are looking at. First, angle at the center is twice that of circumference. Alternately, you can also think of it this way: angle at the circumference is that of half of that at the center. Okay, angle on the same side of the circumference, okay, are always equal. Basically this angle and this angle are equal. If I were to make another angle using the same arc, that angle will also be 50 degrees. Okay, each of these angles are equal. Next is tangent and radius. So suppose if I draw a tangent here, this point is called as point of contact. Let's take point of contact as P, and if I were to make radius here at the point of contact, from center to point of contact, if I were to draw the radius will be perpendicular to tangent at the point of contact. Okay, then one more thing, if I were to draw diameter, and let's say diameter subtended some angle here, okay, angle subtended by diameter is always 90 degree. Okay, and one last theorem, generally the possibility of this theorem is very, very low. But suppose if we were to draw a cyclic quadrilateral, is the one in which all the corners or all the vertices are on the circumference of the circle. In this, opposite angles add up to 180 degree. Basically, angle A plus angle C will give us 180 degrees. Angle B plus angle D will also give us 180 degrees. Opposite angle of a cyclic quadrilateral add up to 180 degrees. Now let's look at areas, some formula related to areas and circumference. First, area of circle is pi r square. Okay, circumference of a circle or boundary of circle or perimeter of circle is 2 pi r. If we were to draw a sector here, area of this sector, just remember it like this. It has got same area of circle formula, only because of proportionality we multiply it with theta by 360, where theta is this angle which is made between the two radii which bound the sector. Similarly, length of the sector, okay, length of the sector is this part. Length of the sector is equal to theta by 360 into 2 pi r. Okay, these are some formulae related to circle which we may use. Next is equations of the circle. So suppose if I have been given this circle whose center let's assume as h comma k and whose radius is r units. Now irrespective of how I draw this radius, suppose if I take some point xy which is revolving point, okay, which moves around the circle, it can be anywhere on the circle because it's any random point x comma y. The distance from x comma y to h comma k will be x minus h the whole square plus y minus k the whole square whole root. Basically root of x2 minus x1 the whole square plus y2 minus y1 the whole square. And we know that this distance is r. If I were to square both the sides, I would get x minus h the whole square plus y minus k the whole square is equal to r square. This is our equation of the circle. Now again remember that I have taken center as h comma k and not minus h comma minus k, but when it went into the formula it became negative. Okay, so basically if I say that I have x plus 5 the whole square plus y minus 3 the whole square is equal to 25, understand that center of the circle is minus 5 comma 3 and radius of the circle is 5 units. Okay, please note the similarities here. Again, very simple questions will be asked on this, nothing too detailed, nothing too difficult. Let's look at some questions on all of this. So first, circles O and P intersect at exactly one point. If the radius of circle O is 2 and the radius of circle P is 6, basically from O to P we get length of 8 units. What is the circumference of any circle that has OP as diameter? If diameter is OP, in that case the radius of such a circle will be half of 8, which is 4, because diameter is 8, radius is half that of diameter. Therefore our circumference will be 2 pi r, which will become 2 pi into 4 units, in other words 8 pi units. Okay, so boundary of such a circle is 8 pi units. Next, which of the following could be equation of the given circle? Which of the following could be the equation of the circle? First, center is 4 comma 2. If center is 4 comma 2, that means my equation is going to be like this: x minus 4 the whole square, y plus 2 the whole square. So we see that we have got x minus 4 the whole square and y plus 2 the whole square in two of them, A and C. One of these two equation is correct. Now our circle is passing here. Let me take this point, although it's a little ahead of 1. Let me assume this point to be 1 comma 0. Okay. Now I want to find how much my radius is, or rather how much is the square of radians. I'll use distance formula after squaring both the sides. So basically I'm not taking root, I'm straight away finding r square. So r square is equal to 4 minus 1 the whole square plus minus 2 minus 0 the whole square. So 4 minus 1 square is 3 square, 3 square is 9, minus 2 square will become 4, so I get 13. So option C is the correct option. Okay. To find value of radius, I have used the distance formula, root of x2 minus x1 the whole square plus y2 minus y1 the whole square. Next, what is the area of the circle whose equation is given above? Now, in this question, it's not clear what's the center, what's the radius. You can't straight away take root of 56 as your radius. That would be incorrect. To find radius, you'll first have to complete the squares. We learned in the last class, to complete the squares, we do x minus whatever is the coefficient of x divided by 2 the whole square, minus whatever you have taken here, square of that, plus y plus 8 divided by 2 will become 4 square, and minus square of 4 is 16 is equal to 56. 16 and 9 give me 25. So I'll get x minus 3 the whole square. Y plus 4 the whole square is equal to 56 plus 25. 56 plus 25 gives me 81. So if r square is 81, r will become 9 units. If r is 9 units, area of the circle will become area, which is pi r square. I see that I did not have found this. I'll get 81 pi as my answer, or option B. Next question. The circle shown here has center O and radius length of 12. Okay, so this length is 12, this length is 12. If P is midpoint of OA, P is midpoint of OA. So that means if this is 12, this also has to be 12. So total length of OA becomes 24. This length becomes 24. Okay, using Pythagoras theorem, I'll now find length of AB. So I'll get AB square is equal to 24 square minus 12 square. 24 square is 576 minus 144. That will give me 332. Okay, sorry, 432. So therefore length of AB will be root of, AB will become root of 432. Okay, that's our length of AB. Now next thing that we want to do is find the area of the circle. Now ideally I shouldn't even have found this. Just let me cancel this out, because question is to find area of the shaded region. One thing that we'll observe here is, if I'm able to find this angle, let's say this angle is theta. Okay, if I'm able to find this angle, hence I am able to judge what this other angle is. If I'm able to just do that, in that case I can use length of sector formula. Okay, so let me just use straight away area of sector formula. Okay, to find this theta, as we discussed, this length is 24 units. This length is 12 units. Using trigonometry, so ka tua. Okay, what we have studied in trigonometry, so ka tua. I want to find the angle theta with respect to theta. This is my adjacent side and that's my hypotenuse. Okay, so I'll be using ka. Cos theta is equal to adjacent side divided by hypotenuse, in other words half. We know that cos theta is half, or you can do in your calculator theta is equal to cos inverse. So cos theta is half. In that case theta will become cos inverse of half, or simply 60 degrees. So if this is 60 degrees, the remaining angle will become 300 degrees, because angle around a point is always 360 degrees. Now using the formula, theta divided by 360 degree into pi r square. Into pi r square, I'll get 6 5s, and I am getting 5 into pi into 144, or into 12 into 12 divided by 6. You could also use your calculator. I'm getting 120 pi as my answer, 120 pi square units. You could have straight up used calculator for this calculations. You can find this value straight up in your calculator. To find this value on your calculator, you'll press shift key followed by cos key. On your screen, you'll see a symbol cos inverse. Once you see cos inverse, you put inside the brackets half or 0.5 and your calculator will give you answer as 60 degrees. Okay, or if your calculator is set to radians, you'll get pi by 3 radians. Next. In the figure above, OACB is square with area 4x square. Okay, so area of this is 4x square. That means each side should be equal to 2x. The reason is area of square is nothing but side square. So if side square is 4x square, in that case side itself should be 2x. Okay. Now question is, if O and OB are radii of the sector of the circle. So if these are radii and we know that radii itself is equal to 2 because all the sides of squares are equal, what is the perimeter in terms of x of the unbroken figure? Basically, you want to find this length of this segment. First, what I'm doing is I'm finding perimeter or length of the arc. Okay, I know that length of arc is equal to theta divided by 360 into 2 pi r. Now understand that I have used 270 degrees because I know this being square, this is 90 degrees. So the remaining angle should be 270 degrees, 360 minus 90. I'll get 9 3s are 27, 9 4s are 36 into 2 2s are 4 pi x. 4 and 4 gets cancelled. I get 3 pi x as my remaining answer. That's my length of the arc. Also, this side is 2x, this side is 2x. Perimeter is nothing but total of all the boundary. So my final perimeter becomes 3 pi x plus 2, that's 4x. I take x common, I'll get 4 plus 3 pi. That's my option A. Moving on to the next question, next part. Now, solid figures, their area and volumes. Now, whenever you are looking at any solid figure, okay, generally straight up questions are there. Only for volume, there would be something which I'll be discussing. Like suppose if I want to calculate area of a cube, okay, cube is basically rectangle in 3-dimensional space. So I want to calculate area of this figure, okay, cube, surface area. There are two types of surface area that we'll look at. One is lateral surface area, which is area of 4 sides, and second is total surface area. Total surface area is basically area of 4 sides, the top and the bottom, the ceiling and the base, the floor. Okay. If I want to calculate total surface area, what I do is I calculate area of this side, then I calculate area of this side, then I calculate area of the side at the back, and then I calculate area of the side on this side. So I calculate area of all the 4 sides, I add them up, that gives me lateral surface area. Total surface area is all the 6 sides. For figures like cylinder and cone, formulae will be given in your formula booklet. Okay, if they are not directly given, if the question is asked on that, you'd see formula appearing in the question itself. That being said, since you have already covered the shapes for your school, and I believe you guys would have already memorized this formula from there, it would be helpful if you just go through those formulae and revise them. Only for volume, I'd like to tell you that whenever you're finding volume of any shape, okay, any proper geometrical shape, volume is always base area into height. Okay, volume is always equal to base area into height. The cuboid that we just saw, for that base is rectangle. Area of rectangle is length into width. Into height will give me volume of a cuboid. Okay. Similarly for cylinder, base is circle, so base area is pi r square. Height is h, so pi r square h gives me volume of a cylinder. If you are looking at any pyramidical or conical shape, in that case volume for pyramid or a conical structure is 1/3 of base area into height. Okay, the reasoning for each of this you have already studied in the school, so that's why I'm not going into the reasoning of this. Just remember this formulae. For volume, you need to know that volume is base area into height. The most recurring shapes, for them formula will be given in your formula booklet. Now let's see. A pyramid has a height of 12 centimeter and a square base. If the volume of pyramid is 256 cubic centimeters, how many centimeters are in the length of one side of its base? Now base is a square. Suppose if I take side of square as x, so base will become x square, height is 12. Since it's pyramid, I'll multiply this with 1 by 3. Okay, this is equal to 256. 3 and 12 will get cancelled out, so square, I'll get 256 divided by 4. In your calculator, straight up divide this and take square root on both the sides. You'll get 16 by 2 or 8 units. So side of the base is 8 units. The cylindrical tank shown in the diagram above is to be painted. Whenever you are painting, of course, you are finding surface area. If you are filling up this cylinder with something, let's say you are pouring water into this, milk into this or something else, in that case you will find volume. Volume is nothing but how much is the capacity. When you are talking about bottle, the material that you need to make that bottle, that material is your surface area. If you are also talking about the cap and the base part which stops water from flowing out of the water, in that case you are finding total surface area. But if you are only looking at the circular, the curved part, then you are looking at curved surface area. But how much water does your bottle contain, or how much water can you fill into that bottle, that's volume. So cylindrical tank shown in the diagram above is to be painted. The tank is open at the top and bottom does not need to be painted. Basically, we do not have anything here, anything here. At top and bottom, we do not want to fill anything. Only the outside needs to be painted. Each can of paint covers 500 square feet. Okay, each can of paint covers 500 square feet. What is the least number of cans of paint that must be purchased to complete the job? First, I know that, okay, we know that curved surface area of a cylinder is 2 pi r h. This will be given in your formula booklet. So I'll get 2 pi, radius is 12 feet into height is 22 feet. If you have your calculator, you can straight up calculate this. Okay, I'm just calculating it without the calculator because at this point I haven't got my calculator on me. Now each paint covers 500 square feet. So therefore, number of cans required is equal to. So I have got 2 pi 12 into 22 divided by 500, because per can I'm able to fill up 500 of this. I'm dividing numerator and denominator with 5. So when I divide numerator and denominator with 5, I'll cancel out this 22. So I'll get 24 pi multiplied by, when I divide 22 by 5, I'll get 4.4 divided by 100. Okay, so when you calculate this value, how much will you get? Let's see. Let's bring the calculator up here. Okay, how much are we getting? So we'll get 24 we'll get 24 multiplied by pi multiplied by 4.4 divided by 100. That gives us 3.37. Now we can't go to shop and buy 3.37 cans, so we'll buy 4 cans. Okay, so approximately we'll need 4 cans to paint this. Do remember, you need to understand when should you round down and round up. Although the answer was 3.3, yet I rounded it up to 4 because shopkeeper wouldn't give me 3 cans of paint. Shopkeeper will give me 4 cans of paint. So that's why minimum will need 4 cans. Next, this is last part, basic trigonometry, which I had used in one of the questions previously. Now, some of you have studied standard angles and you have memorized them. Apart from standard angles, you should also be able to calculate non-standard angles using your calculator. Now, when we learn trigonometry, okay, we have studied SOH, CA, TOA. Okay, SOH means sine theta is equal to opposite side divided by hypotenuse. Cos theta is equal to adjacent side divided by hypotenuse. And lastly, tan theta is opposite side divided by adjacent. Now, if I were to draw a right triangle, okay, if I take this angle as theta, First, side opposite to 90 degree is always your hypotenuse. That doesn't change. Opposite and adjacent side changes with respect to where the theta is placed. So side opposite to theta is called as opposite side. Side closest to theta is called as adjacent side. Okay, and based on this we do all the calculations. Now suppose if it has been given to me that sine theta is 4 divided by 5, then theta will become sine inverse of 4 divided by 5. Basically in your calculator you'll just put sine inverse and put 4 by 5. Whatever answer is, that's your angle theta. Okay, apart from standard angle you would also be asked some simple questions on this. Now, let's look at some questions. The bottom of a pendulum traces an arc 3 feet in length when the pendulum swings through an angle of half radian. Also, this I would also like to take this opportunity to discuss radians with you. Now, what is radian, how it has come, all of that you'll study later on, perhaps during your grade 11th or in your A and AS level, okay? But in basic, if we were to look at relation between degree and radian, 1 degree is pi divided by 180 radian, okay? And 1 radian is 180 divided by pi degrees. Do remember this relation. In short, this relation can be summarized like this: 180 degree is equivalent to pi radian. From there we can derive this conversion. So suppose if I want to convert 30 degrees to radian, so I'll say 30 degrees is 30 into pi divided by 180, or pi upon 6 radians. On the other hand, suppose if I've got say pi upon 4 radians and I want to convert this to degrees, I'll say this is equal to pi upon 4 into 180 upon pi. So that will give me 45 degrees. In higher math, we generally do all our calculations using radians rather than degrees. So if questions on radians come, whatever formulae that we have discussed, okay, no need to change the formulae. You can use the same formulae, only thing is convert the radians to degrees to use those formulae. So the bottom of a pendulum traces an arc 3 feet in length. So question is saying something like this. So suppose if there's a pendulum here, something like this, it's going to trace an arc of 3 feet. This arc is of 3 feet in length when the pendulum swings through an angle of half a radian. So angle between the two radius is half a radian. What is the number of feet in length? The length of the pendulum. Basically, question is asking us how much is the radius. Now, half a radian is same as half into 180 divided by pi degrees. Okay, I'll get answer as 90 divided by pi. Since in the option I see that there's pi in the denominator, most probably that will help me answer the question. But rather than do guesswork, I'll just use the formula because this is the first question that we are solving of this nature. Otherwise, I would have converted 90 upon pi using calculator into a proper number. Okay, so I've got 90 upon pi. Now, I know that length of arc is theta divided by 360 into 2 pi r. Length of arc given to us in the question is 3 feet. Theta given to us is 90 divided by pi into 2 pi r. R is unknown. Pi and pi gets cancelled. 90 ones are 94, the 4s are 360. 2 ones are 2 2s are 4. So solving this, we get R is equal to 6 units. If you have used your calculator to find the value of this, your answer will be 5.99 or 5.9 something. Okay, either ways it's roughly equal to 6 units. So length of the radius is 6 units. Next, cos A is 4 upon 5 and angle A is not in first quadrant. What is value of sine A? Now let's recall our cast diagram. Okay, cast diagram. What this cast diagram says, in first quadrant all your trigonometric ratios sine, cos and tan are positive, In the second quadrant, only sine theta is positive. Third quadrant, only tan theta is positive. And in the fourth quadrant, only cos theta is positive. If you look at degree, this is 90 degrees. Since this is right angle, you get, 0 degrees. Since this is right angle, this is 90 degree. Straight line gives us 180 degrees. 180 plus additional 90 will give us 270 degrees, and once you complete the circle you come to 360 degrees. Now if cos A is 4 upon 5 and angle A is not in first quadrant, cos is positive in first and fourth quadrant, that means definitely angle A is in fourth quadrant, and we want to find value of sine A. So what we'll do is we'll draw this diagram just for our understanding. Well, let's call this as angle A. Now cos theta, ka, is adjacent side divided by hypotenuse. Okay, adjacent side divided by hypotenuse. Using Pythagoras theorem, you'll get this side as 3x units. You may wonder why have I taken x, because that's just for to account for the fact that cos theta is the ratio of 4 by 5 and we do not know the exact number. But for your SAT exam, if you only take 4 upon 5 rather than 4x upon 5x, that's also fine. It will give you the same answer. Sine theta in this triangle, you can say, is 3 by 5. Sine theta is 3x by 5x, which is 3 by 5 or 0.6. Only thing is, if you take answer as 0.6, you'd be incorrect. Because your angle is in fourth quadrant cos theta is positive, sine theta is not. So our answer should have been minus 3 upon 5 or minus 0.6. Okay, so with that we are done with all the different topics that can be asked in SAT math exam. Now we'll just go through each of these topics. Okay, I'm just fast forward recalling everything that we have done through last few weeks, each and every topic that we have delved into. So first, the subject knowledge of SAT, we looked into heart of algebra. We'll just see list of topics for each of this: problem solving and data analysis, passport to advanced math. Additional topics is what we did in today's class. In heart of algebra, you should know how to solve linear equation, how to create equations, how to solve inequalities, how to factorize, add and subtract polynomials, midpoint formula, distance formula, how to graph linear equations and linear inequalities. In data analysis, we learned how to use questions, or how to solve questions of percentages, ratios, proportions, etc. Then we also went through some statistics in these classes. In passport to advanced math, we extended our knowledge of indices, exponents. We looked at rational and fractional exponents. We also saw how to read polynomials graphically. We learned how to complete the squares, how to use quadratic formula. We learned parabolas and their equations, how to solve questions using graph and transformations of the graph. Finally, in today's class, we have learned area and volume, some geometrical geometrical relation between lines and angles we learned in last class. We also saw circles and their equations, complex numbers, only the basics will be asked, and some trigonometric functions. Now we'll just review each of these topics. I'll just point out important points for each of this. Okay, in number system you need to know what is an integer, because generally I've seen when question says integers, some of the students they end up taking decimal as integer. Integer is nothing but, when I say integer, integers are numbers that we use to count and their negatives, like 0, 1, 2, 3. All of these numbers that we use to count 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are all integers along with their negatives. So minus 1, minus 2, minus 3 and so on. Rational numbers are any number that can be expressed as fractions. 2 by 3, 0.5 because 0.5 is 5 by 10 or half. So 0.5 can be expressed as a fraction. Or recurring decimal is something like 0.3333. The reason being 0.3333 is nothing but 1 by 3. How to do that we have studied in our school section. Presently, this is a rational number. So rational number is any number that can be expressed as a fraction. Irrational number are numbers like square root of 2, pi, which can't be expressed as a fraction. Okay, when I say express as a fraction, express in the form of p by q, where p and q are integers and q is not 0. So any number that can be expressed like this is a rational number. Okay. Then we studied complex numbers. Complex number is the largest of the entire number series. All the numbers that we know are contained in complex number. Basically, each and every number that we know is a complex number. Then we studied laws of exponents, in which we learned that if bases are same and different powers are there and we are multiplying, in that case we add up the powers. Do understand that a to the power m plus a to the power n is not a to the power m plus n. That's incorrect. Second mistake that I see students making is, if I've got a plus b to the power m, that's not same as a to the power m into b to the power m. You'll have to multiply the bracket a plus b to whatever the power m is those many times and have to open the bracket. Okay. Similarly, if same bases are divided with different powers, we subtract the powers. If we have got power to power, we multiply the powers. Okay. Different bases, same powers, we give power to each of them. Different bases are divided, we give power to each of them. If we have got negative power, in that case we reciprocate. Okay. As an example, suppose if I've got 2 by 3 to the power minus 4, I'll write this as 3 by 2 to the power 4, which will then become 3 to the power 4 divided by 2 to the power 4. Any number to the power of 0 is always equal to 1. Okay, these are some laws to look at. If you have doubts about this, please go to previous classes. You'd see these questions in details, where these properties were explained in details, along with some questions that were done based on this property. So please go to review those classes and you'll get it. Presently, I'm just running through this. Okay. Then we learned some basics of inequality. In this we studied, suppose if I've got x plus 5 is equal to 4. If I subtract from both the sides 5, it wouldn't change. It wouldn't affect my inequality. Like suppose if I've got greater than, this will remain greater than only. But if I've got minus x is greater than 4 and I'm multiplying both the sides with minus 1, so x will become less than negative 4. So I'm multiplying or dividing by a negative number, sign of inequality changes. Essentially, suppose if I've got 4 divided by x is greater than 3 and I want to find range of x values, I can't transpose x to the other side. Okay, because I don't know if x is positive number. So instead what I do is I multiply both the sides with x square. So I get 4x is greater than 3x square. Okay, I have multiplied both the sides with x square. Then I take this to the other side. So I say 0 and 3x square minus 4x. So 0 greater than x, 3x minus 4. After this, for such inequalities, we just draw a number line and see the range of values that will satisfy our inequality. So I'm putting 4 by 3 and 0, because when I equate this to 0, I get 4 by 3. When I equate this to 0, I get 0. Any value greater than 4 by 3, that is 1.33, I take 2. When I replace 2 here, I'll get positive answer. When I replace say 1 here, I'll get negative answer. When I replace minus 1 here, I'm again getting positive answer. But ultimately, I'm interested in positive answers. So I'm getting positive answer for x which is smaller than 0 or x which is greater than 4 by 3. So that's my solution to this inequality. But no need to worry about such lengthy inequality. This is I have covered just in case, but this type of questions won't be asked in set. Basic linear inequality question and graphing them. Okay, you have learned how to graph linear inequalities. Then next, we also learned that suppose if I've got root 2 plus 3 root 2 minus 5 root 2. In this case, I can add them. 2 plus 3 gives me 5. Sorry, 1 plus 3 gives me 4. 4 minus 5 will give me minus root 2 as the answer. But if I've got root 2 plus let's say 3 root 3, I can't do anything, because root 2 and root 3, I can't add them. So we can only add the numbers if the numbers inside radical sign, number inside the square root are equal, are same. Otherwise, we can't add them. But if it comes to multiplication, root 2 multiplied by root 3, then you can write this as root 2 into 3 or root 6. Okay. Then you studied something about percentages, selling price, cost price, profit percentage. First, profit is selling price minus cost price. Okay. From here you can say cost price plus profit gives you selling price. Also, percentage profit is nothing but profit divided by cost price times 100. Whenever you are finding percentage of anything, it's change divided by original value times 100. If it's loss, in that case cost price will be higher than selling price, so you'll do loss divided by cost price times 100 to calculate loss percentage. Whenever you want to calculate discount, so from original price or marked price, you subtract the discount, whatever value is left, that's your selling price. Again, basic questions, you have seen this in the past classes. Then we learned how to solve linear equation in one variable. There are two methods we generally use in this classes. One is solving linear equation by elimination method. Suppose if I've got x plus 4y is equal to let's take 9, and we have got 3x minus 2y is equal to 1, and we want to find values of x and y satisfying this inequalities. So I see that I've got coefficient as 4 here, coefficient as 2 here. I just multiply this with 2. So I get x plus 4y is equal to 9 as my first equation. 6x minus 4y equals to 2 as my second equation. When I add them up, I get 7x is equal to 9 plus 2 is 11. So x will become 11 divided by 7. Replacing this value in one of the above equation will give me value of y. Okay. Then next set of questions. If alternately, I could have also made x the subject here. Basically, I could have written x is equal to 9 minus 4y, or and in the second equation, I would have got x is equal to 1 plus 2y divided by 3. Hence, I'll get 9 minus 4y is equal to 1 plus 2y divided by 3. Solving both of this will give me value of y. Once I get value of y, replace it back in one of the equation to get the value of x. Okay, that's how we learned how to solve questions of linear inequalities. Then we went through some identities. It is necessary that you understand one common mistake is whenever a plus b the whole square is given, a lot of you make mistake of writing this as a square plus b square, but that's not the case. Plus 2ab comes in mind. If you forget this identity, a plus b the whole square is simply a plus b times a plus b, open the bracket, simplify, you'll get that. Similarly, a minus b the whole square is a square plus b square minus 2ab. A square minus b square is a minus b times a plus b. Apart from this, there were some more identities, but these are most commonly occurring identities. So it's better that you just know this many. Others, if you want, you can just derive the way I just told you. In factorization, we studied, suppose if I've got 2xy plus 3x square y. You take out whatever is common to both of them. Xy is common to them, so you take xy common, you'll be left with 2 plus 3x. Similarly, you learnt factorization for quadratic polynomial. Now, for quadratic polynomial, suppose if I've got ax square plus bx plus c, you generally do sum and product, which some of you remember as salt and pepper. But yes, you do sum and product here. When you're doing sum and product here, your product is not c. Do you remember product is AC? Generally you take C because value or coefficient of x square is 1. 1 into any number is number itself. That's why you take product as C. But product is always A into C and sum is B. And then you go on and find factors of AC such that that sum or difference comes out to be B. Okay, you have seen how to do that. Then you also learned factor and remainder theorem, which we use in multiple questions. Factor theorem says, suppose if I've got some polynomial f of x, okay, if f of a comes out to be 0, that means x minus a is a factor, and vice versa. If x minus a is a factor, f of a will be 0. If x plus a is a factor, f of minus a will be 0. Also, if f of a comes out to be 2, that means if I divide f of x with polynomial x minus a, my remainder will be 2. Okay, when I divide this, my remainder will be 2. That's our remainder theorem. The usefulness of this theorem we have studied in the classes, and how to apply this theorem in detail, we have seen those in questions as well. Then we also learned what are zeros of a polynomial. So suppose if there's a graph, okay, which crosses x-axis at certain points. This sometimes called as solution of f of x is equal to 0, okay, are also called as zeros or roots of the polynomial. So zeros of the polynomial are nothing but the points at which graph crosses x-axis. Also mathematically those are the points at which function becomes 0, okay. Also, if suppose if I wanted to solve f of x is equal to 2 and I wanted to know how many solutions exist for f of x is equal to 2, you just draw this line y equals to 2. Wherever it intersects the graph f of x, those are the number of solutions or solutions of the equation f of x is equal to 2. Then you studied absolute inequalities. In absolute inequalities, you studied, like, suppose if I've got mod x is equal to 2, mod x is less than 2. Mod x is less than 2 and I want to find values of x. So what we did is we just sketch a rough graph and see what happens. So this is graph of mod x. This is graph of y equals to 2. Now I want mod x to be smaller than 2. Smaller than 2, that means the graph of mod x should lie underneath the graph of y equals to 2. So basically this two values, between these two values, minus 2 and 2. So this means your x lies between minus 2 and 2. On the other hand, if I say mod x is greater than or equal to 2, in that case you'll see after this point mod x is always above the line y equals to 2. So x is either smaller than minus 2 or x is greater than equal to 2. Okay, so that's how we learned how to solve absolute or modulus inequalities involving modulus. Then we learned how to find distance between 2 points, which we also discussed in today's class. Distance is nothing but root of x2 minus x1 the whole square plus y2 minus y1 the whole square, where x1 comma y1 are coordinate of first point and x2 comma y2 are coordinate of second point. We also learned how to find midpoint of a line segment. So suppose if this is my line segment having coordinate x1 y1 x2 y2, not just midpoint. Suppose if I want to divide this in the ratio m is to n, in that case I'll do x comma y, coordinate x comma y, x coordinate will be equal to mx2 plus nx1 divided by m plus n, and y coordinate will be my2 plus ny1 divided by m plus n. Okay, this is how we use section formula. This is called as section formula. Out of this, if we want to find midpoint, you take m and n both equal to 1. So midpoint becomes x2 plus x1 divided by 2, x2 plus x1 divided by 2, y2 plus y1 divided by 2. This is our midpoint formula. Okay, coordinates of midpoint are given using this formula. Then we studied how to find slope. Slope is rise over n. In other words, slope of a line is nothing but y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1 divided by x2 minus x1. We also learned how to find equation of a line. Also we learned slope of parallel lines are equal. So if two lines have slope m1, m2, lines are parallel, that means their slopes will be equal. Perpendicular line, for perpendicular line, product of the slope is equal to minus 1. Okay, we also learned how to find equation of the line. Equation of the line is y minus y1 is equal to m into x minus x1 when one point and slope is given. Otherwise, we use the equation y equals to mx plus c in case if we know slope's value, how much is numerical value of slope, and what is y-intercept. Y-intercept is the point at which line crosses y-axis. Okay. Also, we learned how to use the line so as to find slope of the line. So suppose if I've got 2x plus 3y equals to 5, I want to find slope of this line. So I'll simply make y the subject. So I get 3y is equal to minus 2x plus 5, y equal to minus 2 upon 3x plus 5 upon 3. Since coefficient of x is minus 2 upon 3, we say that slope is minus 2 upon 3. Okay. So that's how we find equation of the line. Then we learned how to find determine domain and range. What is domain? Domain is nothing but inputs to a function and ranges outputs of a function. So suppose if I've got a graph which is going like this. Okay. So whatever this y value is and whatever this y value is. So y lying between these 2 points, let's say this is -3, let's say this is 7. So -3 is less than equal to y, which is less than equal to 7. So my range is -3 to 7. On the other hand, domain is my set of inputs, x values. So if this is 1, this is 8, my x values are ranging from 1 to 8. So domain is x lying between 1 and 8. Okay, again, very simple questions may be asked on domain and range, and you should be able to determine them graphically. Then we learned something called as composition of function. In composition of function, we learned that fg of x or fog of x means I have to replace x with the function g of x in the given function. As an example, suppose if f of x is equal to 3x plus 5 and g of x is x square. I want to find value of f of g of 2. G of 2 can easily be observed to be 2 square 4. So f of g of 2 is same as f of 4 because g of 2 is 4. Replace x with 4 in the function f of x. 3 4s are 12 plus 5 17. That's value of fog. Then we studied something about percentages, how to calculate percentages. Here we learnt one very important method called as unitary method. In this what we do is we compare or we equate the quantities. Now suppose if I want to reduce a particular quantity by say 20%. So if I want to reduce it by 20%, that means remaining quantity will be 80%. Let's say original value was let's say 50. And after reduction of 20%, we do not know what the value is. We just cross multiply and find the value. Okay, we use unitary method in generally tricky method. We started with 100 because it's very easy to think in terms of 100 when we are looking at percentage, and from there we went on to simplify. We also learned ratio and variation. Here importantly I would like to talk about direct and inverse variation. For direct variation means if one thing increases, second thing increases, and if one of the two things decreases, second thing decreases proportionately. Now in direct variation we studied, suppose if I have quantities A, B and C, D correspondence like this, so we cross multiply so as to find the answer. Whereas for inverse variation is the one where increase of one quantity leads to decrease of another, and decrease of one quantity leads to increase of another quantity. In such a question we forward multiply. So if I've got like this, quantities like this, A will multiply with B, C will multiply with D, we'll get AB is equal to CD, and from there we go on and calculate our values. Again, for notes on this, detailed notes on this, please check set lecture number 6. Over there we had discussed ratio and variation. We had learned how to calculate simple probability. Probability is nothing but chance of occurrence of something. So suppose if I were to roll a die and I wanted to know what's the probability of 2 or 5. So if I'm only interested in getting a number 2 or 5, total there are 6 numbers, 1 2 3 4 5 6 when you roll a die. So probability of getting 2 or 5 is 2 out of 6 or 1 out of 3. Then we studied how to interpret parts of linear functions. So any linear function can be written as y equals to mx plus c, or f of x is equal to mx plus c. Here m, it tells us how much increase is there. M represents increase or decrease in y pertaining to 1 unit, increase or decrease in x. Okay, if m is positive, that means 1 unit increase in x will lead to whatever the value of m increase in y. If m is negative, 1 unit increase in x will lead to those many units decrease in y. C represents our initial value. Okay, initial value, or at the start what was the value. You should understand how to interpret the function because this is very important part of set math. After this we also learned exponential function. Any exponential function can be written as a into b to the power x. Okay, here a represents our initial value at the start, how much of the quantity we had. B is a growth or exponential growth or decay factor. Okay, exponential factor. And X can be anything. It could be timeline or how fast you are increasing. Generally, X represents the period at which we are looking in the word problem, in the modeling problems. Then we went through graph and tables. First, we learned pie chart. In pie chart, we learned that our angle, central angle theta, to calculate central angle theta, we do whatever is the value corresponding to a particular commodity, value of the quantity or commodity divided by total of all commodities, total of all quantities times 360. When we use this formula, we'll get central angle. Vice versa, if central angle is given, we want to find actual value, we do the other way around. Apart from pie chart, we also learned circular charts wherein data was given in percentages and we had to find all the values. Over there, we use unitary method or method of ratio and proportion. We learned bar charts. In bar charts, we should understand how to read bar charts. So suppose if I have been given a bar chart, say 2 bar charts. Let's say this is boys in your class and this is number of girls in your class. Okay, the blocks would be given. Suppose this stands at 10, this stands at 20, like this. Different data is given. Let's say this stands at 16. Okay, so we need to understand that according to this, if scale is not mentioned, that means there are 10 boys and 16 girls that we are looking at. If the scale is given, if they said that 1 centimeter on y-axis is equal to 10 units, so 10 means 100 boys are there and 160 girls are there. Basically, we factor in 10. Then we learned histogram. In a histogram, most important things that we need to understand that in histogram, the bar represents the area. So on y-axis, generally frequency density is given. On x-axis, a time period is given. Whatever the x represents, the time period is given. So something like this would be given 15, 20, 25, 30 and so on. And then there would be bars. So if I want to calculate frequency of any bar, frequency is nothing but area of each bar. To calculate area of each bar, you take the width. I'm writing class width, but you take the width, multiply it with frequency density. Okay, because height will be represented by frequency density, which tells us that frequency density is frequency divided by class width. Again, simpler questions would be asked on histogram, nothing too tricky. Line graphs, we use line graphs whenever we are looking at the growth of particular commodity over a period of time. So suppose if we are looking at stock of a particular commodity, okay, how it rose and fell throughout the day or throughout the month or throughout the week. We can represent that using line graph. In line graph, you should know that suppose if my line graph is like this, okay, so if my bar is parallel to x-axis, this represents constant change. Basically, constant, no change. Value remain constant. Basically, no business what is happening. If the line is more slanted, basically, if the angle with x-axis of that line will be greater, that means it represents higher change as compared to this angle. Let's call this angle as alpha. So here, out of the 3 periods, this represents the highest increase. Because the line is more slanted, that means angle will be higher. This represents a bit lesser change, whereas this represents the constant, there was no change. Whereas if the line is going downwards, that represents decrease. Okay, there was fall in price or something. Lastly, we learned two-way probability table. In two-way probability table, we also learned that some conditional probability questions can be asked. What we mean by conditional probability question? One is straightforward question, like what's the probability of a person picked at random reading non-fiction books? So that will be 28 divided by 140. On the other hand, if I were to ask you what is, if a person is selected at random and this person is of age 22 to 50. Since I said 22 to 50, I have locked in this. I know that person is 1 out of 59 people. What's the probability that this person reads sci-fi? So that will be 18 out of 59. Okay, this we call as conditional probability. In conditional probability, we already know which group have we picked a person from, and then we are looking at probability from that group, from under that group. Then we studied scatter plots. In scatter plots, we saw that there are two types of scatter plots, linear and non-linear. For linear, we saw uh, after drawing line of best fit, we can come to know either if there is positive relation, that is if line is going forward like this, left to right upwards, it's increasing function, that means positive relation. If it's left to right downwards, decreasing function or a negative correlation. But if line is straight, horizontal or vertical, no correlation. Here also there's no correlation because there is no discernible pattern. There's a weak correlation here because points are not very closely knit. Strong correlation because points are very close to each other. This is non-linear correlation because you can see a pattern over there. Only thing is this is not a straight line pattern. Such a pattern is called as non-linear correlation. You should only be able to identify linear and non-linear correlations. Then you studied sampling. In sampling, again, nothing too deep. You should just know what is the sample. Sample is nothing but when we are unable to study entire population, we just study a part of population. In sample, you should know what is bias in sample. Bias sample means, suppose you wanted to know what's the favorite application among teenagers. So what you do is you go and ask only your friends. So all your friends would be preferring the same applications as you because you guys would be communicating amongst yourselves. So this wouldn't give you very proper result. To get a proper result, it would be better if you go out and talk to other people. Okay. So bias in sample comes when we take population which will give us mildly biased result. For example, suppose if I wanted to know average number of hours a person reads, and I go to library and talk to people who are there in the library. Obviously, these people read more hours in a day than ordinary people. So that's why this is a biased sample. Then in statistics, we learned how to calculate mean. For simple mean, we just total up all the values divided by number of observation. If there were frequencies, then we did summation of f into x divided by summation of f. To combine mean, we learned that total of first value. To calculate total of first value, we did first mean into number of observation plus second mean into number of observation divided by number of each of the observation. That gave us the combined mean of two groups. Similarly, we can extend this theory to three groups, two or more than two groups. Median is the middlemost value in your data set. To calculate median, you arrange the values in ascending order and then find the middlemost value. If it is frequency based data, you simply do n by 2 and see which class does it fall into. Whichever class it falls into is your median class. Mode is most recurring frequency in the data. The frequency that has occurred maximum number of times. Range is largest value minus smallest value. We also studied that if I were to add or subtract something from each value, then all of this will change accordingly. If I add 5 to everything, mean will be plus 5. If I reduce 3 from each and every observation, mean will reduce by 3 points. But range will be unaffected on addition or subtraction. Range only gets affected if we were to multiply or divide. Then we studied complex numbers. In complex number, we studied root of -1 is called as imaginary number and it's represented with I. Any complex number is any number that can be represented a plus bi. Now if I say a plus bi is 3 plus 5i, basically if I say two complex numbers are equal, this is only possible if their real parts and their imaginary parts are equal. We also learned what is conjugate of a complex number. So suppose complex number z is 3 plus 5i, its conjugate, sometimes also represented like this, will be 3 minus 5i. We also learned how to multiply, add and subtract complex numbers. To add complex numbers, suppose if I want 3 plus 5i plus 2 minus I add up the real parts and I add up the imaginary parts. Similarly for subtraction. For multiplication, it's simply opening the brackets. For division, you multiply with the conjugate of the denominator. Okay, and simplify that, you'll get the division of complex numbers. Apart from this, you should also know the powers of I. I to the power 1 remains I square is -1, I cube is -I to the power 4 is 1. Okay, so that's how you did your powers of I. In general, I to the power 4n is always equal to 1. So you generally break. Now suppose if I want to break I to the power 99. So I'll write this as I to the power 96 into I to the power 3. I to the power 96 will become 1. I cube is minus I. So final answer is minus I. After complex numbers, you learned how to complete the squares and you studied quadratic formula as well. To complete the squares, let me remind you, if equation is ax square plus bx plus c, you can't straight off complete the squares. First you take a common. So you'll get x square plus b divided by a into x plus c divided by a. After that, whatever is the coefficient of x, okay, you divide that by 2 and you write like this. If it were minus b here, so I'll get x minus b by 2a the whole square, and then plus I'll do c by a minus b square by 4a square. Opening the brackets will give me a into x plus b by 2a the whole square plus a into c by a minus b square by 4a the whole square. So that's how completed the square forms. We learnt the importance of completing the squares, which I'll tell you in few moments. We also learned quadratic formula. For this, if I wanted to find value of x such that this equation is equal to 0, then we say x is equal to minus b plus or minus root of b square minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, that was our quadratic formula. Then we learnt what is the meaning of discriminant. Discriminant is nothing but b square minus 4ac in our quadratic formula. So if discriminant is equal to 0, that means we have got just one root. One root, or we also say equal roots, okay, two equal roots. If discriminant is greater than 0, that means we have got two real roots. They can be rational or irrational. But if discriminant is less than 0, that means we have got imaginary roots or no real roots. Imaginary roots means if I were to graph them for d equal to 0, my graph will brush x-axis. It will just, x-axis will be tangent. For d greater than 0, graph will go like this, whereas for d less than 0, graph will go like this. Okay? Then we learned about equation of parabola, and based on that, graph of parabola. So if my equation is ax minus h the whole square plus k, so graph will go like this, assuming a is positive. If a is positive, we get upward parabola. If a is negative, downward parabola. The vertex of this will be h comma k. Axis of symmetry here is x equals to h. Again, this concept is very important from SAT's perspective. You should know equation of parabola and what does it represent graphically, okay? And that's why we complete the squares. Another way to find vertex for any equation, if our equation is ax square plus bx plus c, in that case we say x coordinate is minus b by 2a and y coordinate is minus d by 4a, okay? That's how we find the vertex. So h is nothing but minus b by 2a, k is nothing but minus d by 4a in this equation. We should also know how to find the y-intercept. To find y-intercept, simply put x as 0. Okay? Vertex is nothing but minimum or maximum point of the parabola. Then we learned how to transform the function. First we learned horizontal transformation is x plus or minus a, where a is some positive number. X plus a will shift graph towards right. X plus a, f of x plus a will shift graph towards left by a units, whereas f of x minus a will shift graph towards right by a units. Similarly, f of x plus a will shift graph up by a units, and f of x minus a will shift graph down by a units. Third, negative of f of x is reflection in x-axis, whereas f of negative x is reflection in y-axis. And lastly, we learned that if we apply modulus to our function, in that case our function, the negative part of our function, which is below x-axis, reflects above. Okay, it just goes above into the positive part. Then here onwards we covered in our today's class, we studied different theorems of circle. First theorem was, suppose if I'm making some angle here, let's say this angle is 2x degree, then the angle on the circumference will be half of this, or x degree. Angle between two angles made on the same side of an arc or same opposite side of the arc are always equal. Okay, so both of these angles will be equal. As many angles as I make there will be equal. We learned that diameter subtends a right angle on the circumference. We also learned that angle between tangent and radius at point of contact is 90 degree. Then we learned equation of circle. For equation of circle, we learned that if center is h comma k, then our equation is x minus h the whole square, y minus k the whole square is equal to r square. Okay, and then from this point onwards, whatever we did was in today's class. So with that, all that we studied, that we have revised or we have gone through in this class, I did not do a lot of questions on other concept. I just briefly recall the concept. While I recall, I hope you took the moments to go through in your mind whatever questions that we have done in the past classes, and you have reviewed them. I strongly suggest that you solve all the questions that we have gone through during the period of these classes, and if you have not, please make sure you solve all those questions by yourself and see if you are able to solve them without taking help from these lectures. Apart from that, after that, solve a lot of mock tests. Mock tests will help you speed yourself up. At the same time, it will help you check if you have understood the concepts clearly. Okay, if you have any doubts, any queries, you can always get in touch with us. With that, we conclude our today's class. Make sure you write your set paper properly, you finish it off in time, and do well. Hopefully, each of you will score 800 on 800 in SAT Math. Thank you. Bye and have a good day.